Hello, welcome to this next talk. This next talk is about Interslavic, a common language for all Slavs, by Patscheke. And again, the info is if you want to ask questions, you can ask the questions during a talk already. To ask the questions, you go on slido.com and then you enter the keyword Babel. And now the scene belongs to Michael.
Okay, hello everybody. So, everybody coming in? Wonderful. Yeah, welcome to my talk, Interslavic, a common language for all Slavs and a gateway to learning Slavic languages, or in Interslavic, Medžuslovjansky, spolny jezyk, dlja vsih Slovjanov I vrata k učenju slovjanskych jezykov. So my name is Michael Patscheke. I'm a language enthusiast from Germany. I do not do that professionally or something. And during the pandemics, I decided I wanted to learn my first Slavic language, and I wondered with which one to start. And I just Googled, and somehow I came across Interslavic and thought, that's a cool concept. Let's have a deeper look into that. And now I will explain to you what Interslavic is and what the concept behind it is. Okay, so one question, let's wait until everybody is in. Okay, so what I would like to know is how many of you or who of you has any Slavic language as a native language? Okay, quite a lot. How of you have advanced knowledge of any Slavic language? And how of you have a little idea about Slavic languages, some concepts? Okay, and who does not have any idea of Slavic languages at all? Just maybe a couple of vocabulary. Okay, that's the minority, just one or two words. Yeah, I'm very curious because later on I will show you a video with experienced Interslavic speakers, and I'm really curious how much you will understand. Okay, now, as you know, Slavic languages are, of course, all different. They are different languages, but still they have very much in common. A lot of vocabulary is common, a lot of the syntax, grammar has a lot of things in common. So it would be nice to have a language somehow in between all those languages that anybody, any Slav, can actually understand, and the thing is, without prior learning. So nobody has to learn this language, it's just there, and all the Slavs can understand it. That would be a great idea. In this way, you could really address the whole Slavic world with one language at the same time. And of course, it would be nice to have a language that's so easily learned that Slavs from all different languages and countries could communicate to each other very easily. And maybe it's not really learning a different language like a foreign language, but it's more like, how can I adapt my own native language so that the other Slavs can also understand it? So that's would be a great concept, and that would lead to easy communication between the Slavs. And of course, it would also be a great tool for non-Slavs. So if you learn this one language, you could address all Slavs, not just the group of one language, but all of them. Could be a good idea for traveling, for example, stuff like that. And also, it's, of course, a good introduction to living or real Slavic languages. Like to understand the system behind it or the idea, it would be a very useful introduction. Okay, I have to say, Interslavic is not supposed to be a concept like Esperanto. It's not a worldwide simplified constructed language, but rather it's constructed, but supposed to sound or feel natural for the people of one zone, the Slavic language zone. So it's supposed to be a natural constructed language. And it's not meant to be a pan-Slavic language to replace the local languages, but a tool so that they actually can communicate. Well, do we need such a language? Aren't there other tools to communicate between Slavs? Yes, of course there are. One obvious tool is English. Most people learn English nowadays, especially the young people, so hey, you can easily just talk to each other in English, and that's fine, and you get away and you get around. That's obviously a solution which actually takes place in real time. But then don't forget that in many parts of Slavic countries, especially in rural areas or with elderly people, English is not so widespread as you might think, or at least not to a degree that people feel comfortable having a conversation in it. And besides, I think many Slavs would feel a bit ashamed to speak to another Slav in a completely different language, in a Germanic language. It's kind of a pity, so not a very bright idea. The other thing is, well, which is the most widely used Slavic language? It's, of course, Russian. So why not use Russian as a universal Slavic language? Well, Russian is actually not, language-wise, it's not in the center of the Slavic language. It has some features that are very peculiar to other Slavic languages. It's not the easiest one to learn. Besides, it has only the Cyrillic alphabet. And well, some do not have the best experience with Russian domination too, so it's probably not such a good idea either, not even a simplified Russian or something like that. Well, let's go back 1,000 years. Why not take Old Church Slavonic? That was a kind of Interslavic language designed for liturgical uses for all Slavs at that time, like 900 AD. But, I mean, the vocabulary is very archaic. And not only the vocabulary, but also the grammar and the structures. It's very far away from all existing Slavic languages. So people don't really find or feel themselves comfortable speaking in Old Church Slavonic. And one other solution, of course, is, well, everybody speaks his own language, maybe slowly and clearly. And the other one tries to understand and answers in his or her native language. And they can communicate somehow. And this actually does take place, and it works, especially between neighboring languages or countries like Polish and Slovak. That should be fine. But Polish and Bulgarian, that's more like a problem, I think. So all of this is not a good option, but the last two concepts, the Old Church Slavonic and the everybody speaks and adapts his own language, this is basically the starting point for Interslavic. So how did it come out? Well, as I said, Old Church Slavonic was basically the first Interslavic language concept 1,000 years ago. And in the meantime, there were other concepts of, some Slavists a couple of hundred years ago, but I mean, these were times without internet and without easy communication between the countries or the peoples. So it really didn't work out. But in this century, in the internet ages, there were two major projects. One is Slovjanskyh from 2006. It's the idea from Jan van Steenbergen, a Dutch Slavist. And his idea was, okay, let's put all Slavic languages together and see what's the common denominator, which form, which word, which grammar rule is mostly used in most languages or most widely understood. Which one should we take as a common word or grammar rule? And 3 years later, there was the Neo-Slavonic project from Wojciech Merunka. He is a Czech mathematical linguist. And his idea was, well, let's start with Old Church Slavonic and see how would it have evolved over the centuries and what would it look like and hear like today. And those two concepts, they actually, well, they knew of each other, they met and they said, hey, our outcome is 90% identical. Why don't we agree on a common system? And that's what they did in 2017. So it's basically quite recent. And from there on, they renamed the project Interslavic. Well, for a language, you need an alphabet, and it was clear from the beginning, you cannot take the Latin or the Cyrillic alphabet. You need both. Otherwise, half of the audience is not served properly. And what they did is they basically took the old Yugoslav concept of two identical or interchangeable alphabets. So every letter of the Latin alphabet can be transposed into Cyrillic and vice versa, identically. So what they did is they took the normal Latin letters and added the Czech diacritics, the ch, sh, and j, and also the ye. And that's it. And for the Cyrillic, they took the usual letters, and then they took from the Serbian or Yugoslav alphabet here the lj, nj, and also the y. And from Ukrainian, they took the ye. And so you can transpose directly from one to another. It doesn't matter which one you take. It's exactly the same script in two alphabets. So where did they take the vocabulary from? Well, it's obvious. The first part of the vocabulary is the common all Slavic vocabulary. Words like dom, dobri, which are identical in all languages. Of course, they are also in Interslavic. Then you can, of course, use all this international vocabulary, all the Roman, the Latin and Greek international words. They are widely understood in all Slavic countries or languages. And you should avoid words that are borrowed in single Slavic languages from, let's say, neighboring countries. For example, the Poles say dach for the roof, which is, of course, a German word, but I mean, in Croatia, nobody knows what dach is because they're not familiar with this concept. And so you should get away with those words, only Slavic words. And then, of course, there remain many words that are not identical in all the languages, and then they installed a voting system. But not by speakers, because then Russian always wins, that makes no sense. And also not by number of languages, because how do you count the languages? Which languages are big enough to be a language or not? Like Rusyn, or even small languages like Slovene versus big languages, so that makes no sense either. So what they did is they formed groups. First group, only Russian. Second group, Belarusian, Ukrainian. Third group, only Polish. Fourth group, Czech, Slovak. Fifth group, Slovene and the Serbo-Croatian language continuum. Sixth, Macedonian, Bulgarian. And, well, you list up and say, hey, what's the majority or what's best understood? And you take this word for Interslavic. And you just don't take the words as they are in those different languages, but you go back to Old Church Slavonic and say, hey, how would the sounds have evolved so that you have a consistent system? And if all this doesn't work, well, you have to do some engineering, and I will show you examples of that. So, for example, okay, the first two, like house and good, they're all the same in all of Slavic languages, and they used to be the same in the old language, like Old Church Slavonic and the estimated Proto-Slavic, so obviously you take the same for Interslavic, that's it. Same with good, dobri, some form of dobri, dobro, dobar, but it's all the same. Let's say yes. Russian, da. South Slavic language, also da, and it used to be da in the old days. But then you have the Belarusian, Ukrainian, Polish who say tak, and Czech, Slovak who say ano. So, well, majority rule says da has three groups, and also tak is more like such. This is such. And ano is a short form for yes it is. So it's not the real word, so you take da as the Interslavic word. Or more difficult to do, Russian djelat, same Czech and Slovene, and in the old days djelati, but then you have the Ukrainian, Polish, Slovak, something like robić. Well, you have to choose, and they choose djelati because robić in the old days meant more like serve and not work. Or here, another example, time. There used to be two concepts in the old days for time, like čas and vreme. And you see it's realized differently in the different language. Some say čas, some say vreme. And, well, they said, let's allow both. Why not? And I go here to year, same thing, God, rok, God, well, godina, rok, let's allow both. But then you have hour. Maybe that's a rather new concept. 1,000 years ago, an hour was not important. So all the languages engineered something for themselves. Some used the word čas, which when they use vreme for the time, they use čas for the hour. Others take also godina or hodina. So that's... Oh, sorry, yes. So it's hard to, if you, yeah, you're right. So, and this, of course, leads to misunderstandings. So you should not say godina as an universal word, because then it's an hour or it's a year, difficult. And they engineered something and say, okay, why not časina? It's half of everything, more or less. Or another example, November, which is, of course, the Latin month name. But in many Slavic languages, it's listopad, which, of course, means the leaves fall. They fall in November. But the problem is, in Croatian, for example, listopad is not November, it's October, because the leaves fall earlier there, I don't know, whatever. So there it's also already the cold month. So in those cases, it's better to use the international, well, Latin word, or even say, hey, get away with the names, just use the numbers and say 11th month, on the 3rd of the 11th of 2022, to avoid misunderstandings. Okay, grammar. The grammar consists or contains all common features of Slavic languages. 3 genders and the special animated male gender, 6 cases, or 7 with vocative. Then you have the verb conjugation, the 3-person, singular, plural. The verb tenses, present tense, the past with the well-known L participle, of course, which is adapted according to the gender, and future with budje plus infinitive. You have the verbal aspects. So it's a very Slavic language. It's not easy as Esperanto, but it sounds very natural. And the only thing is the exceptions for the declination should be reduced to a minimum. So it's easier. Yes, there is declination, but not so many exceptions, please. And also, the founders proposed an easy Interslavic, which is called Slovjanto, so Slavic Esperanto. That's supposed, its meaning. Without gender, without cases, without conjugation. So an English sentence like, the old woman speaks with my little children, would come out as Stari žena govorit s moj mali djeti. And every Slav would say, oh, what's that? I can't hear this. This is awful. So the real Interslavic is, of course, Stara žena govori s mojimi malimi djetami. So this easy version sounds more like baby Slavic or pidgin Slavic, but I mean, it's a way for non-Slavs, for beginners, to communicate with Slavs. Now I will give you a text example. This is actually taken from a real hotel in Israel, somewhere on the Dead Sea, I guess. And instead of putting signs up in Russian, Ukrainian, and Polish, and whatever, they just put up one sign in the 2 alphabets, like dragi gosti, dear guests. Hotel takože imaje svoju privatnu pláž. The hotel also has its own private beach. And pláž jest na druhoj straně ulice. The beach is on the other side of the street. Vstup na pláž jest через veliké zelené vrata. Entrance to the beach is through the big green gate. So, and that should be enough for everybody. That's a text example. And now I come to my video example. It's on YouTube. Actually, you have those 4 people here. This is Wojciech Merunka, one of the founders. And here he is a Pole, a Ukrainian, and a Serb. So you have the West Slavic, East Slavic, and South Slavic part. And let's see how this works. I will show it 2 times, one slowly without subtitle, and the second time normal speed with subtitle. Okay, I hope this works, and I'm not very curious. Oops. Speed 0.75, subtitles off. Okay, let's go and see. I wanted to explain what this video is all about. You know Euronews. Euronews is a European TV news channel in many languages, also in Russian, but they decided to establish also a Serbian channel in Serb language. And those Interslavic speakers proposed to Euronews, why don't you take Interslavic instead of Serbian? This way you could address many more people. And yeah, let's hear what they say.
Dobrodošli, ja jesam Vojtěch Merunka, jesam iz Čechije. Iz grada Praga.
Dobry dzień, ja jestem Michał, jestem iz grada Poznań w polskiej krainie.
Dobrodošli, moje ime jest Jaroslav, jestem iz Ukrainy.
Dobrodošli, ja jestem Filip, jestem Srb, no żyję w Warszawie, w Polskiej Republice. Pozdrav.
Widzicie, dragi przyjaciele redakcji Euronews, to jest medžuslovjanski język. Mnogo podobnych słów i my na tym języku mówimy. Wojto, możesz li nam rekti objasniti nekakove detalje?
Da, mogu. Medžuslovjanski jazyk jest umjetno sotvorený slovjanský zonálny jazyk, ktorému mogu vsi slovjansko govoreći ljudi razumjeti bez potreby nikakvog prethodnog učenja.
Da, tako jest. I kto hoće učiti se togo jezika da bi mogel aktivno govoriti, trebuje toliko nekoliko dnjev praktikovanja gramatike i osnovnog slovnika. Jeszcze хочу kazati, że всякий, kto ima interes do projekta medžuslovjanskog jezika, može koristiti naše sajty i servery Facebook, Discord, YouTube, TikTok i druge. Vsaku sedmicu imamo v Discordu medžuslovjansku sobotu, medžuslovjansku nedelju, gde možemo praktikovati medžuslovjanski jezik.
Dragi prijatelji Euronews, prizivajmo takože i vas priključiti se do naše međunarodnej grupy. Mi govorimo na međuslovjanskom jeziku i vi također možete govoriti na međuslovjanskom jeziku da bi vas cijeli slovjanski svijet razumjel. To ne je teško.
Pozdrav, doviđenja. Pozdrav. Doviđenja, pozdrav.
Okay, who of you has understood what they were saying? Okay, well, that's who has not understood. Okay, few. Well, they say about 80% can understand. Like Czech Slovaks, more than 90%, and maybe Bulgarians, 70%. This is basically what the audience here tells us as well. It really works. Okay, I will do it again in normal speed with subtitles, so you can normal speed.
Dobrodošli, ja jesam Vojtěch Merunka, jesam iz Čechije, iz grada Praga.
Dobry dzień, ja jestem Michał, jestem z grada Poznań w polskiej krainie.
Dobrodošli, moje ime jest Jaroslav, jestem iz Ukrajiny.
Dobrodošli, ja jestem Filip, jestem Srb, no żyję w Warszawie, w Polskiej Republice. Pozdrav.
Widzicie, dragi przyjaciele redakcji Euronews, to jest medžuslovjanski język. Mnogo podobnych słów i my na tym języku mówimy. Wojto, możesz li nam rekti objasniti nekakove detalje?
Da, mogu. Medžuslovjanský jazyk jest umietno sotvorený slovjanský zonálny jazyk, ktorému mogú vsi slovjansko govoriaci ľudí razumieť bez potreby nikakého predchodného učenia.
Okay, I change to Cyrillic.
Да, tako jest. I kto хоче учитися того язика, даби могъл активно говорити, требує тільки некілька днів практикування граматики і основного словника. І ще хочу казати, що всякий, хто має інтерес до проєкту меджуслов'янського язика, може користати наші сайти і сервери Facebook, Discord, YouTube, TikTok і друге. Всяку седмицю маємо в Discordu меджуслов'янську суботу, меджуслов'янську неділю, де можемо практикувати меджуслов'янський язик.
Dragi prijatelji Euronews, prizivajmo takože i vas priključiti se do naše međunarodnej grupy. Mi govorimo na međuslovjanskom jeziku i vi također možete govoriti na međuslovjanskom jeziku da bi vas cijeli slovjanski svijet razumjel. To ne je teško.
Pozdrav, doviđenja. Pozdrav. Doviđenja, pozdrav.
Okay, now some words to the current state of the Interslavic language. It has more or less 2,000 fluent speakers, of course no native speakers. It has websites with information, language tutorials and tools, dictionaries and so on, Facebook group, Discord server, TikTok, YouTube channels, some translated books, an own wiki, Medžuslovjansky. And also there was a film in 2019, The Painted Bird, a Czech film. It's a film of World War II in some Eastern European country, and the director didn't want to associate the country to a this place to a certain existing country. So he Googled, is there Slavic Esperanto? And he ended up with the people of Interslavic, and so all the dialogues are actually in Interslavic. So, but of course the language has challenges. One of all is professionalization. I mean, today only Slavists and some volunteers take care of the language and develop it. That's too few, and it would be very helpful to have an acceptance as official language, to have a real 2-digit language code or an own Wikipedia version like Esperanto, for example. It has not so far. And also, it would be nice to have dictionaries and translation programs that go far beyond that what they have. It's rather limited. And also, you need language learning material for Slavs And for non-Slavs, that's the big problem. There is hardly any material to really learn it. And it would be nice to lobby with politics about the usage of Interslavic. All this is missing, and of course it's a chicken and egg problem. They say, hey, you have 2,000 speakers. I mean, we don't care about 2,000 speakers. This is your private hobby. So there will be no professionalization, no use in public, and so no speakers. So now at the end, I want to give you my personal opinion about this language. I think that it's a great language, great language for language enthusiasts, polyglots like us, and Slavists. It's really great. I love it. And also, it's very useful for one-way communication. So if you have to address a mixed Slavic public in tourism, in public transportation, talks like this one could be held in Interslavic, and most of you would understand, obviously, as we have seen. Or news, like the Euronews example, that would work perfectly, and you don't need laws for that. You can just do it. Any hotel can do it. Any train company can do signs in Interslavic. You can just do it, but, well, nobody does. The problem is two-way communication. If only one person speaks Interslavic, well, you don't understand the answers. So this is a major problem. And well, my idea to that is, do not introduce Interslavic as another foreign language at school or something like that. Nobody would ever do this. But you could incorporate Interslavic lessons to the school curriculum of the native language. So in Poland, you could dedicate like 3 months for 10th graders, 15-year-olds to Interslavic, have some virtual student exchange with Bulgaria, a class from Bulgaria, for example, and train this. And it's also good to know there you don't only learn Interslavic, but you only learn much about the structure of your own language. So I would just incorporate this in the native language lessons. I think this would help a lot, because then you have thousands and millions of people who have an idea about that. How about Slovjanto? Well, I think it's not really necessary. Slavs won't speak like this. This is awful for them. And if you're a tourist and you're really unambitious and just want to make yourself understand, you could as well learn any real Slavic language like Slovak or whatever, learn some words, and you can make yourself understood as well as with Slovjanto. So I think this has no big future. And of course, in theory, Interslavic would be a good gateway to the world of Slavic languages. To me, it opened opened much to see the structure behind some features between the different Slavic languages. But as I said, there's the chicken and egg problem. It has no practical use so far, and there's very little language learning material. So for me, yes, I started with Slovjanto, but after 2 days I was done with what material was there on the website, and it was not very much. And even with Interslavic, you're in your bubble. You can just talk to friends in the Facebook group. It's not a real language. So it took me just some weeks to actually switch. And then after that, I learned Slovak, and then hopefully other Slavic languages too. But as a first step, it was great, but nowadays, I would say not really more. Okay, here at the end, again, the title of this talk, you can see the 11. I didn't make too many mistakes. Of course, I do not speak all those languages. I just took it from Google Translate. But you see, it's very similar. Okay, now your questions. Well, the questions come here. Okay. Do they see it? Okay. How did you learn Interslavic? Which resources would you recommend? Well, actually, I just used the official website. I have I can give you the resource again. So the original website from Interslavic, from Mr. van Steenbergen, and did their little exercises, what they have, not really more. But I was just fascinated by the system, but as I said, I gave up after a couple of days, basically, and didn't really learn it. I wouldn't know how. What was the reaction to that Euronews ad? I have no idea. Maybe they didn't even notice it, I guess. Is the orthography standardized, or are there varieties? Well, actually, I didn't talk about that. What I presented is the preferred orthography, but they allowed for regional variants, so it's easier for different speakers of Slavic language to actually write it. So if you don't have the diacritics on your keyboard, so Poles could write CZ or SZ instead of the diacritics, the Patscheke, or something like that. Or South Slavic languages do not know the distinction between the Y and the E, so it's allowed that they just write the I everywhere. So yes, in theory they allow a lot, but this is preferred spelling. How much was Interslavic already tested? What data do we have? E.g., how much learning is needed to fluency? How much of it do people understand without learning? Well, I don't know exactly, but they always write 80% can understand it, and this audience has proved the same, so basically it should work. I'm not a Slavic native speaker, I'm not even professional in any Slavic language, so I cannot know, but basically the language, well, it was coded in 2017, and at once 80% could understand it. Of course, to get to this, they maybe tried different versions until 2017 to get to this final result. Okay, how long does it take a Slavic speaker to pick it up? Months or just weeks? Well, this is actually something I would like to know too. I have no idea, I don't know. Maybe somebody has a guess? Well, we are all language lovers here, of course. We pick it up in a couple of days. But the average Slav, I'm not sure. Well, I suggested 3 months of school teaching in 10th grade. I don't know whether this is a realistic time. I just don't know. Are there any other examples of real-life uses other than the hotel sign that exist? Well, apart from the bubble, I mean those texts and Facebook groups and Discord server and all this, so designed for the public. For example, there's a yearly meeting, yearly Interslavic meeting, and there all the speeches were only in Interslavic, and all those participants from other Slavic countries who were not trained to speak Interslavic, they could actually also understand it, 80% and so on. So yes, there are singular examples, but probably not very much. Are you sure all Slavs will understand it if they know only their native language and any other Slavic one, and not any other, I guess? Are you sure all Slavs? No, well, as I said, it's 80% to understand, and the more you're educated, the more you understand, obviously. So if you have really no exposure to international language, to neighboring language, or to tourism, and well, in a little village on the countryside, in some remote area, well, it's probably harder. So it's not sure that everybody will really understand, but many will understand. What was the response to the Israeli hotel sign? Did tourists think it was a bad machine translation, or did they realize this is a new language? I would like to know, I don't know. I just don't know. Actually, I took it from a paper edited or written by Jan van Steenbergen, where he proposed tourism use tourism use of Interslavic, and he gave this as an example, and of course he wouldn't say it was a bad example, so I don't know. How does this compare to Slovio? Yes, actually, those two languages they have basically trouble with each other. The founder or the inventor of Slovio designed a easy Slavic language with Esperanto-like grammar, or he took much from Esperanto, and supposedly used some Slavic words, but some say, or the Interslavic people say, oh, he uses so much Russian words, it's not really Interslavic. So, and the bad thing is that the Slovio guy reserved all the internet domains for Interslavic. So the Interslavic people don't get their real Interslavic domains, so it's like hate and whatever. So not a good idea. Is there a possibility of a Medžuslovjansky literature? Well, possibility, of course. I mean, some books are translated, like Le Petit Prince, Saint-Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. Stuff like that is translated. Maybe somebody has translated the Bible, I don't know, but I mean, it's not widespread. Does Interslavic have cases, and if so, how many? Actually, it has all six cases, and I think the vocative is more or less the same as the nominative. So bad for Bulgarians and Macedonians, they, well, have to learn this. But all the others are familiar with the concept. Is there an official dictionary vocabulary? Is there an authoritative? No, there isn't. No, it's just the guys who run this, who do the effort, and there's no official authority. Do you have to learn the entire vocab, or could you learn words that are particularly confusing, like false friends, and kind of improvise the rest of it? Well, this is what I'm saying. It needed some learning material, especially, for example, if you teach Interslavic at Polish schools, you should, of course, teach the children which Polish words please not to use, and instead to use this one. These are other words that Bulgarians should not use, but instead use more Slavic ones. And all this is missing, so there's no good teaching material so far. And well, I just found this very little that is on the website, and it's some volunteers who did it. What can you expect? It's very limited. Could you pass me the microphone to ask a question? Oops, not allowed. Has The Little Prince been translated to Interslavic? Yes, that is the most famous example. If not, I'd volunteer. No, it is. Could you pass me, okay?
Yes, I'm
the
there.
microphone?
I have just one question, because I heard in the video that there is a word like, they say nasze sajty. Why don't they say nasza strona or nasza strana or something like this? Why don't they use a Slavic word for that? Site, website, for example, like nasza sajty. I heard it is nice.
Well,
it just doesn't sound very Slavic that way.
I don't know. I mean, those four guys are only humans too, and as there is no official Interslavic, in this moment they might have felt that the English word site is easier or comes to mind earlier. I don't know. There's probably a better Interslavic word, but he didn't use it. Are other projects like Slovio and Neo-Slovjansky officially dead? Well, actually, I haven't heard anything of Slovio anymore. I don't know whether it's officially dead. And Neo-Slovjansky, I'm not sure. There were many pre-Interslavic projects. Some of them were incorporated into this Interslavic. I think Neo-Slavonic, which was it? Neo-Slovjansky, I think it has gone into this project, but I'm not sure. The words are a little bit confusing. Has The Little Prince? Okay, if not, I'd volunteer. Connect, we had that. Could you repeat for which Slavic branch it's more difficult to understand? Slavic branch? What do you mean by branch? Like which kind of? Oh, you mean which Slavic? Oh, I see. Which language branch? Okay. Well, what I've read is that the languages more in the center of the Slavic, which would be like Czech, Slovak, Rusyn, stuff like that. I think they pick up easier, and the farther away you get from the center, it will be more difficult. So Bulgarians will probably have the hardest time, I guess.
Just a little interruption.
But I don't know.
Just a little info. We have 1 minute left for the questions, so I will then close the questions in 1 minute. Okay. How to deal with the English, German, French, and Turkic loan words in this Interslavic language? Yeah, as I said, if those words have already become global loan words, then it's fine to incorporate them. There's no need to be more Slavic than the Slavic nations or the Slavic languages. No problem to incorporate international loan words into, like sauna, Finnish loan works as well in Interslavic. Of course, there's no problem with that. But the problem arises with loan words that have just come to one or few Slavic nations because they are neighboring nations or something like that. And you should get away with those because it's hard to understand. Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much.